Today we're going to be turning a giant Warlord Titan Gatling blaster into an amazing piece of scenery with a burnt out laser trench. It's tabletop time, I'm Dave, and today we are continuing our journey building the coolest Titan board ever. If you've been following along up to now, you'll see we've finished the assembly of a bunch of our Titans, and it's now time to start finishing some elements of the board. So that means building, customizing, painting, and finishing off each component with each video. So we should have something really cool to show off by the end of this one. So we have a Jen helping us today.
Hello.
One of the awesome parts about this project is because it's on 3 separate boards, we can work on it simultaneously. And when Jen starts her own part of the project, we'll be able to do the same for her.
So the Warlord gun is going to go here and it's going to be blasting through a giant trench right through the middle of the board.
And we're going to be digging down into this board, so the trench will actually be a melted, deep scored area where you can place infantry and they can get a bit of a cover save. On each end, to match the height of the Warlord's Gatling laser blaster, we are also going to build up a burnt out husk of melted rock, which will act as a balancing, equivalent sized line of sight blocker.
And in a future video, we will be putting a Chaos Reaver Titan right in the middle of this board.
Enough words, time for guns.
So it wouldn't be a Forge World build without starting the video with a little bit of scrub-a-dub-dub.
I heard you say that people put their resin parts in the dishwasher?
Yeah, we've had some comments saying it would be quicker to put this in the dishwasher, but I don't know how food safe that is. I don't really want resin or resin release agents mixing with my bowls.
But if we do want to kill everyone in the studio, well, it's a good method unto how.
Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. No. It won't kill them, just slowly poison them over time. Now, being Forge World, this gun did have 6 bendy barrels that needed to be warped back into shape.
Oh, Forge World, you and your bendy barrels.
To do that, I placed the support rings in the middle and actually bent the barrels around them using some hot water. I was very careful to avoid getting it on the actual supports. These are quite thin bits of resin, and if they warp, it's going to be really obvious. This being a modern Forge World kit, thankfully they've started to hollow out their pieces so it won't weigh as much, and it went together pretty smoothly aside from the bent barrels. And once it was put together, it was ready to prime. Or should I say, time to Optimus Prime.
We're going to be building a lot of Titans and painting them, and I want to come up with some interesting ways to weather them. They've been there for 10,000 years, which is like an unfathomable amount of time. And there's some tutorials online that are really cool using chipping mediums and things like that, but I'm really curious about trying to use Martian Iron Earth. So I'm going to do a bit of a tester on this door. I'm going to spray it black and then silver. Then I'm going to layer Martian Iron Earth on it. Then I'm going to spray another color on top while it's wet and see what happens. And I'm kind of hoping that the orange of the Iron Earth looks like rust and then it all pulls apart and cracks and it works really well. Probably going to be a disaster. But if it works well, we can use it on our Titans.
It's time to apply some Martian Iron Earth onto this door and hopefully chips and cracks, but we'll see.
It didn't work at all. So I'm establishing some tones on the Gatling blaster. I'm bringing in some really dark metallics just to try and break up the really bright silver. Now I don't need to go into too much detail here because the first stage of this weathering process is going to be some streaking grime. I'll pull back a lot of it, but this should really blend the whole thing together and make it feel like it's aged as a whole. But this will just be the first of many layers of weathering that are going to be needed to make this feel 10,000 years old and as part of a board. Once it becomes part of the terrain, there's going to be a whole nother round of weathering as well. I'm really gonna have to weather this journey. It is time to streaking grime. That's right, I'm gonna lay my foundational colors with streaking grime. It's gonna be great, and then we can work on some more weathering from there. We have medium rust and crusted dark rust. Let's do it. Or should I say, let's do it. I don't know, what else would I have said?
It's griming time.
We've done this a million times, you know what we're doing. It's a base coat of black followed by a spray of silver, and that's how we get our foundational colors. With the colors sprayed down, I got a nice dark metal from scale 75, and I just picked out a bunch of detail areas on the gun to give even more variance. I don't have to do much here beyond base coating because a huge amount of my depth and highlights are going to come in the later steps of the paint. We have to remember that we are making an entire gaming board in just 2 weeks, and a lot of this stuff is going to be buried in sand and under a whole bunch of weathering pigments, so there's no point wasting a whole bunch of time painting things that nobody will ever see. So I had an action plan with the streaking grime. I put it in the airbrush and I got a dark rust effect, concentrating on all the deepest recess areas of this model and also adding a few sprays to the flat panels for a little bit of variance. I didn't want to get complete coverage with this as I would be coming in with a second color to fill out the gaps.
Spraying down that silver with a matte varnish definitely helps bring the rust colors to life.
It's also super important to varnish the model prior to putting on streaking grime because when we we use white spirits to pull back the enamel paints. If you don't have a varnish on it, they will also pull back the previous layers of paints as well. With the first color laid down, I got a medium rust. This has got a lot more yellow tone in it, and I use that to cover the entirety of the gun. I do also overspray the areas that I'd previously done in the darker rust, but I make sure to airbrush on with a different level of consistency across the whole model just to create some variance.
These colors look absolutely gorgeous. I'm in love with this paint job already.
With a quick break of some well-deserved Chibi Maruku-chan, we could continue. This is the wild and wacky world of what we do while we paint minis. All right, grime is on, and it's time to get the white spirits out. Using white spirits, I drag down in vertical lines to cause the streaking grime to run and create these lovely rust lines and rain marks across the model. Not that there's any rain on Mars, but it does make for a nice texture and weathering effect. A lot of the times when working on this project, it became really apparent that it was more important to paint what people would expect to see than what might necessarily be scientifically accurate on Mars.
Gotta say, I'm definitely turning around to using this method. I've seen it used before on other models, but on machines or big guns like this, it looks really, really good.
I think every hobby tool has its place, and the careful use of things like enamel washes and streaking grimes, especially on large mechanical constructs, is a really nice way to accent the paint job. After all of this, it had some time to dry. I got some of that Veil Joe chipping medium, and I applied it all over this area of the gun that I would be painting in a charcoal grey. So I have to leave this to dry for half an hour and then come back over the top and paint on some grey.
Let's see what happens.
I thought I should bring in our resident streaking grime connoisseur.
Did someone say streaking? Did my ears prickle somewhat? Just slide right in.
Ooh, this is a grimed gun. The Martian sands.
Yes. Oh, so we're going for a really rusty grime.
It's been there for 10,000 years.
On Mars.
On Mars.
All this red, that's all grime. Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's magic. So no dry brushing, no you didn't
nothing.
add the red colour except for grime.
Just two different grimes. Here is another palette of a different grime.
You spoil me, Dave.
Oh, we're having a grimy fix.
Yeah, I grime this.
That is going to be exquisitely grimed, sir. That is the most desert-bound, buried grime
Is it?
piece I'll
So
look
I
at.
could go pretty aggressive with the grimes
very
here.
aggressive.
Yeah. I love how I act like a grime connoisseur and it's all refined. No, I'm just brutal. Like I'm an addict and I pummel shit with
good.
grime.
I like it.
With that chipping medium applied, I decided to carefully come in and paint with the airbrush. I thought the airbrush would lightly and delicately lay down some layers of paint that would be easy to remove afterward. This is a Legio Mortis engine, which means a black and red paint job. Classic colors and a really good combination for a bunch of filthy traders.
Or if, again, you're doing Armaded Lady and they're also red and black. You know, whatever.
Or if you're doing like Blood Angels
Or an AFL football team.
what else is black and red? Red Corsairs.
Black Templars.
Black Templars. Yeah, I brushed on a nice little gradient to the center of these two colors as well, just to highlight it up. This is a really simple and basic paint scheme with an airbrush on a vehicle of this size, but there's no point in putting much more effort into it given the steps that are about to follow.
That's some fancy freehand I see there, Dave.
I wanted to give a little touch of what Titans would have. Titans are covered in adornments and are super lovely, but this one's a bit ancient. I don't want to go crazy in depth doing some kind of freehand mural or something here because this particular part of a Titan is going to be mostly buried in sand, but I did want to allude to some of that. So I just grabbed an ivory colored paint and I painted on some faux text, starting with the word Sanctus, and then I followed on with the usual half or scribble writing at this scale. And then quickly threw down a very rough choppy sketch of a skull. Legio Mortis, also known, I believe, as the Death's Heads, or is that someone else?
We're gonna Google it and find out.
Literally Googling it right
Yeah,
now.
We can't give you misinformation here.
Yeah, Legio Mortis, Death's Heads. So I wanted to have a skull.
You say he's all skull and no bones?
Jen, that was a reach even for you. Now you might be thinking, oof, that skull looks really rough. Well, it's about to look a whole lot rougher. I could have taken this and obviously made it way better, but the plans to bury this in pigments and chip it up just mean that just be a waste of effort. I also made sure to add a little Titanicus T on the side there on the right before I grabbed a sharp tool and began to experiment with chipping off this paint.
So do you want to support Tabletop Time but Patreons make you feel physically ill? Well, you can support us on our new website where we have a whole bunch of merch, including brand new aprons where we fixed where the logo goes. We love aprons, it helps us get less messy. I'm wearing 3 right now. So go onto the Tabletop Time web store, links are in the description and on screen, and support the channel, get some cool merch, maybe find some of those sweet posters from our roleplay channel while you're there.
Applying a bit of water to the end of the sharp tool really helps lift up those top layers of paint. You do have to be careful that you don't scrape too deeply because you can, even with the varnish, drag up the paint layers underneath.
I've never used this medium before, but this is a really cool effect.
One thing I really like about it is that it leaves these little textured areas where the paint is peeling off the model. And if you do this with painting techniques, you can't end up with those little textured ridges and lumps.
It also seems like a lot less effort too than literally trying to paint in these chips, but probably more effective.
I especially start to think this method comes into its own when you can get these large sections and sort of start to peel them off, exposing a large amount of that rusty metal underneath. And you can now see why I went to the effort of doing the streak and grime techniques. There's this gorgeous, varied, textured metal effect underneath everything I'm revealing. So it doesn't look like a single monotone color. It looks like a real piece of metal.
Satisfying.
Now Legio Mortis trim their stuff with bling. That's right, some gold paint was needed all around these trim sections.
Bam, and the dirt is gold.
It does look a lot brighter, but gold doesn't actually weather in nearly the same way that regular metals do, so I figured that this wouldn't be weathered to nearly the same extent. I painted it all out and then used Peridot Alchemy, a scale 75 paint that has a slightly green tinge to highlight it all. And then I came in with Seraphim Sepia Wash, gave it all a deep dousing in that color. With that done, we can lean back and have a look at what this gun is starting to look like. I'm really happy with how this is turning out so far.
Yeah, this looks really, really good.
So when you're working on huge projects like this, a lot of things need to happen simultaneously. So while I've got more bits of this awesome laser blaster drying, it's time to really get a start on the board. So it's kind of the first time we're hitting the board. I'm gonna get the hot wire foam cutter, set up a nice blade that will be good for this, and then I'm gonna go outside and I'm gonna hot wire cutter it, and it just started raining. It is like 30 degrees.
It's like nearly 40.
It's been hot all day and I'm just about to go and... When it stops raining, I'm gonna go outside and hot wire foam cutter right up this trench, and we'll really start to see the shape of what is to come.
I actually thought it was like the metal roof popping in the heat. What the hell?
Marge! The rains are here.
So there's a really neat attachment on our hot wire cutter that is a piece of wire you can effectively bend into whatever shape you like. Really good for carving trenches out of boards.
I've actually used this before too, and I find it oddly satisfying to use.
Now, I was really careful to carve in as straight a line as possible, and I did create a few little wobbles just to give a bit of variance in the shape of the rock, almost as if different types of rocks had been more or less resistant to the laser's blast. Now, lasers don't just fire when they hit the ground. Well, don't worry, the Warlord is still to come.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Jen, you're finished building your knight finally. And everyone's already seen that video, so that's awesome. But now you can help me build this laser trench. So I've functionally finished the gun. I'm gonna place it sort of off to its side there. I've got all these pieces of the Warlord's arm, which I wanna break and scatter a little bit and maybe stretch some cables across from the gun just to make a bit more drama around the weapon. But beyond that, it's time to actually work on the foam. Do some trenches, do some putty, basically start to make the trench look more like
A trench.
a trench. Yeah.
Just be careful with touching those rusty objects. You might like get sepsis or something from them.
I'm more worried about immediately rubbing the paint off them.
Oh, they're painted. Get the joke? Because they look really good, so I didn't think that they were painted.
I got it, Jen.
Yay! Thanks, Mo.
I'm gonna put some sculptor mold on this board and start to make the board look like something.
I'm so excited. I love using sculptor mold.
So this is gonna be the first of many steps. We're going to start by making the shape of the crater, some ridges along the edge, and also flattening off the bottom of it because this has been around for a long time, so it's sort of filled in with some dirt. Also make it a lot better for playing. I'll also be texturing all around the laser blaster itself and providing a sort of space for that to sit on. So let's do it.
Yay! Are we adding any color?
Yes.
Now, we've been using these concrete pigments, these color oxide pigments for a long time. Just mixing that with the Sculpted and some water is really easy, instant color to provide some base tones to your board. We mixed together some deep red with some brown to create a nice Martian base tone. We'll be able to airbrush in some areas to deepen the color and the orange effects in some areas, but also use sand effects to lighten other parts of the board. One of the most delicate parts of this process, or at least the most nerve-wracking, was creating a nice little mud pie nest that would be the home of the laser blaster. I built up a whole bunch of sculptor mold. I just put it in there. I didn't pack it in at all so that I could squanch in this gun, and it was kind of satisfying.
So we need to make a few things such as the bridges, and we grabbed some Games Workshop terrain kits, and they just have nothing in the way of floor tiles that aren't broken and ruined. So thankfully we previously 3D printed a space board that we were going to make a video out of, and we still may one day. We basically want to make like a boarding actions board but 3D. So we have heaps of tiles, and I actually think these are going to be super appropriate for these Mechanicus themed sort of floor tiles. So we're going to repurpose some of those to build our bridges, and it should work really well.
Yeah, go team!
Team. So I want to put a few little undertones of dark charred earth in the trench. Most of it's going to get covered up with textures and pigments, but I think it would be good to just get a bit of black, just a little bit of darkness and shade down in these areas. Sand mix is done. It's time to mix up a liberal amount of PVA and water, basically traipse it all over the board for the first coat. Start to bring some texture into this. This board is going to be heavy, but lucky it's going to be heavy duty for living in a game store. We're going to do this before it clogs. These squirt bottles with PVA and water in them do not last long, but it's really important that we seal in both this pigment and also seal the sand on properly before we go on to dry brushing. And if we use a brush, we're just going to move all of that dirt that we've kind of carefully put where it is meant to be. Oh god, it's already started. Scientists invent a PVA glue spray bottle that works every time, and you'll make crafters very happy.
The board is all dried. It looks pretty okay, but we need a bit more work to do.
It looks very mediocre right now, but that's part of the process of building these terrain boards. All we've done is put in the foundational textures. There's a lot of work to go. And I will say, it's not all going to be done in this video. So the plan is to complete the focal points, then towards the end of the board, bring it all together by doing the finishing touches on all of the terrain itself. The focal point of this video is getting the gun done. So in service of that, we have a few things we want to add. Some shrapnel and rocks around where the gun had initially fired. And also we're going to incorporate the bridge that Murray has made and a few other little bits and bobs before we can start using weathery pigments to bring it all together.
So let's get to work, because we've got a lot to do.
This project is ridiculous.
I thought the blast where the barrels were wasn't really accentuated enough, so I grabbed a bunch of rock as if these were heavy bits of rubble that were displaced when this gun fired, and I basically threw that out like shrapnel on either side of the gun. We also continued this trend by adding smaller amounts of rock along the length of the trench, almost as if there was a surge of earth throwing some of the heavier rocks to the sides of the trench before it was all cauterized and melted into a heap of slag.
So I know you had given Murray the task of painting up the bridge that would go on this board.
Yeah, these are a nice little accent, something the Mechanicum have added since the destruction to aid in crossing this particular part of Mars. We've got a little bridge and what I imagine is kind of a Mechanicus signpost, just data bursting you information through the noosphere as you drive by it.
I love that.
This kind of thing adds a whole bunch of flavor to the board without getting in the way of gameplay, and I want to add little accents like this across the entirety of the game. At this stage, we realized that more sculptor mold would be needed, which meant more drying time, making this particular part of the project scarily close to its deadline of release. I mean, the video is going out in like 2 hours, right, Jen?
Yeah, that's about right. But luckily enough, it is a blistering hot day, so hopefully this board dries in no time.
It's all right. Anything we don't get done in this video or need to touch up will happen later. The project still has plenty more time to go. But what we did use the sculptor mold for was basically to blend in all of these rocks, and also I wanted to add a bit of variance and randomness to the top edges of that trench. It was looking a little bit uniform for my liking, so I just bulked out in a few areas those lips of the trench where rock had melted in the past.
Any excuse to play with sculptor mold is a good one.
Getting Murray's little creation to fit did require some aggressive negotiation.
I call it aggressive negotiation.
Once that was done, it was easy to glue it in and just squanch it in with some sculptor mold. It ain't moving anywhere once this dries. I like that this bridge is wide enough for a rhino to go past or any of those lovely Primaris hover tanks. Once this was done, we took the board outside to dry and off camera, really sneakily added on some more of that sand we glued on the day before, just to cover up the sculptor mold areas we'd recently added on. This was left to dry, and then another another layer of PVA to really cure it in. Then I could come back and finish the board around the areas that were the focal points for this video. To do this on the board, I airbrushed in a few washes to grab a little bit more variance into the ground and areas, especially around the gun, before I then came in with a dry brush and dry brushed all the terrain. Mars was once terraformed in the world of 40k, and I like to imagine that despite it being a radioactive hellscape, there are still a few dead and dry examples of life or hardy radioactive growth that can grow on this planet. So I did add a couple of dried tufts and weird alien plants, but I kept it really minimal. Once those were glued on, the final touch was to give that really sandy, dry look to the board. One of the great things about weathering pigments is they dry looking, well, dry. They look very dusty. So I used the charcoal weathering pigment liberally inside the trench to create a burnt look all around where it had blasted the earth. Then I used several pigments matching the color of Martian earth, dragged them up onto the sides of the gun to really give the look of a sandswept, dry, and ancient ruin.
And with that, I'd say this board is looking pretty done.
Go, go, go! On my command, fire the Titan cannon. Fire! Begin recharge. I want that gun firing again.
Always, we just want to say a massive thank you to all of our patrons over on Patreon. You get awesome perks for being one, and we really do appreciate every single one of you. You guys help us make awesome videos like this and future projects that we're super excited to get started on. So if you'd like to consider joining, all of the links are down in the description below.
Cool. So that's the laser trench board. We hope you've enjoyed it. Now, a lot of the board we are going to come back to. We're going to keep working on towards the end of the project.
There's a heap more videos coming out as well, leading up to this awesome Titan board.
The next one out is the Deus Tempestus, the fantastic Warlord Titan and hero of the book Mechanicum. We're really excited to show that with you all, and that'll be coming very soon. If you're interested in following the journey of this awesome Titan board that is going to become a mainstay of House of War and the top table at Arc 40k, make sure to like and subscribe and check out the rest of the videos.
Don't forget to check out ARC as well. It's happening on the 4th and 5th of March, and tickets are still available.
For general admission. Meet Squidmar. Meet us.
The Victoria Minis.
It's going to be sick. Do it. I'm actually going to bring some models. They've got an open painting hall that they've added now. To just like hang out and paint.
I saw on Sunday you can bring like your old sprues and do like a big trade day as well.
Yeah, I'm hyped. I'm going to be hanging out there for a bit. So get out of here. See you later. Did you just knacker yourself?